It's always interesting to see what my guests from the past have been up to since we interviewed them. This episode's guest is from an interview from 6 years ago. If you go to dreambigworld.com, you can see what Juan de Lascurain has been up to, and he has been up to a lot. He has been doing all sorts of vibrant, colorful, interesting projects with brands. He's been doing things around the world. He is a speaker, and he was very interesting when I spoke with him. I heard him speak, and I thought he was very inspiring, and I asked him if he wanted to be on the podcast, which at the time was very new. In listening to this podcast, I was just asking him every possible question, trying to dissect how he got to where he was. So it is kind of interesting to listen to the interview from that standpoint. But great guest, very inspiring, very interesting. I encourage you to go to his website, dreambigworld.com. And here is my episode with Juan. So Juan, your background originally was very focused on physicality. You did triathlons, you were a tennis instructor, you were a tennis player. So you now that's like a different part of your mind. Now you obviously use a different part. Can you tell me a little bit about the experience of using physicality in your daily life and in your work?
So yes, I was a tennis player, grew up since I was 6 years old playing tennis. Played until I was 24. Then I became a triathlete, but all along I was running. So like you said, my life was more as an athlete, and that I guess that discipline. So a lot of things I use now in my work as an artist or as a designer, an entrepreneur as well. A lot of it is the discipline that you develop. Doing a sport for so many years.
Yeah.
So a lot of that has been very beneficial. So discipline, also, when you're in sports or you have, you use your physical ability in a sports setting, competition, the will to win.
Yes.
All of that has helped me a lot as an entrepreneur. I do two things. I'm a designer, artist,
Yep.
but I'm also an entrepreneur.
Gotcha.
There's some people that are just creative and they're not so much entrepreneurs.
Yes.
They need somebody else, to help them get their work out.
To move it forward.
To move it forward. With me, I've been pretty fortunate that I have both.
Yes.
And a lot of the skills that I learn in the physical world, sports world.
Yeah.
Have helped me, not give up. I mean, I did Ironmans.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So really so being a triathlete and being a tennis pro, that developed some foundational skills. It sounds like they were discipline and competitiveness that have helped you be successful in your creative career.
Yes. For example, tennis is more, you need to be more patient.
Okay.
Tennis is more of a it's physical, but, it's like, small 30-second, 1 minute, that you're going fast or running, then you get a break.
Okay.
It's more mental.
Yes.
Well, all sports are mental, but tennis is more, patience.
Yep.
Strategy.
Yes.
And then you take triathlon, take an Ironman that lasts 10 hours non-stop. You can get a break if you want to, but the goal is to finish as fast as possible. So Ironman, up to a certain point, after certain hours, it's all about not quitting.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't get that time that you get in tennis to sit down, when there's changeovers and, use a towel.
Yeah.
Triathlon is just go for, if you're decent, you do 9 hours.
Yeah. So during that period, were you creative in any way, or were you really just driven by those ideas that we talked about around discipline and competitiveness?
No, as a young kid, no, I was never creative in the sense that I never painted, I never designed, I never took art classes. My dad, when I was 7, he put me on tennis. I love tennis,
Yeah.
and really that became my life.
Yeah.
I used to go running with my mom too. She was also very athletic, so we would go swimming,
That's
running.
great. You're very lucky to have that, to
Yeah.
have parents that embrace physical fitness. And were they competitive as well?
My dad played soccer competitively.
Yeah.
My mom not, but she just liked to swim. We grew up in Mexico, up in the mountains, and so I would go with my mom since I was 6, 7. I mean, we would walk, but I would run, and
Yeah.
I mean, it was fun, and I mean, my greatest memories are either playing tennis with my dad at the club, or running or walking on the mountain with my mom.
Okay.
So I think that background really gave me, since I'm 47, obviously, I mean, I was competitive from the age of 7,
Yep.
8, until 30.
Yeah.
So that's 24 years of every day. I knew every day I had a goal. I would wake up and either, if it was tennis, then I played tennis and tournaments, and I played in college. Then after college, it was triathlon. I did for 5 years, travel around the world
Yep.
with triathlon. So, 24 years of doing something.
That wires your brain. When you're doing something, anything daily, whether it's good or bad, the little neurons in your brain are being rewired to support whatever you're doing.
Mm-hmm. And I didn't even know I was going to be an entrepreneur or an artist or a designer, because I didn't discover that gift until 10 years ago.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So it sounds like at some point a creative door opened that was not opened before, and it sounds like it happened a little bit later. A lot of the people that I interview who are visual artists, they always talk about how they were pretty universally the artsy kid. They were always doing arts and crafts. When a project in school was needed that required an artist, everyone would always look to them. It sounds like you were not that, and that really this door opened around the age of, in your 30s. Can you tell me about that experience of that opening up?
Yeah, I mean, so I wasn't even looking into it, It wasn't, like you mentioned, I wasn't like the typical kid that, always did art. But no, I mean, it really happened. My first kind of like opening into what's the word? It was television first, which is different than art, but it's still more creative.
Yep.
It was when I met this guy who owned a non-profit TV network, and just talking, he offered me to do a TV show on his network. He didn't pay me because it was a non-profit network, but he told me, hey, if you do a show here to inspire people, I'll put it on the air. And so I was like, okay. I thought about it, and I said, well, I have nothing to lose,
Yeah.
And I've always been very open-minded to opportunities.
Sure.
I studied business, and I never thought, okay, I'm just going to go work for somebody for the rest of my life.
Okay.
And so when that opportunity came to me, I said, well, what are the chances that you meet someone that offers you to do the TV show, and he will air it for free? And, so I was like, okay, I'm going to try it. If I'm not good, then, I'll stop doing it.
You basically said, what the heck, why not? So where did that come from? Where did that, because a lot of people don't have that. A lot of people are presented with opportunities such as you were presented, and they're afraid and they don't jump on it. But you obviously were not, and you were open to, you were very open to new experiences, new challenges. Where did that come from? Were you always like that? Was that was that associated with the exercise and the tennis and the triathlons?
Yeah, I think it also goes back to my parents, because my mom, since I was very, very young, she always told me all things are possible. She said, just follow your passion. She said, you have a purpose for being here other than just go work like everybody does just to pay their bills. And she said, always have faith. And then my dad on the other side, put me into sports. So it was this great combination of faith, believing that you're here with a purpose, and that things happen at the right time. And so I grew up just like, I have an open mind. Somebody comes and tells me like, hey, do this, like, I'll do it. I have no boundaries. Not maybe boundaries is not the right word. I have no limits in my mind,
Yeah.
because humans tend to limit themselves. We put a limit on what we think we can achieve when sometimes we haven't even tried something,
Sure.
So when this guy offered me to do the TV show, I said, okay, sure. I didn't even have equipment or the money to do it, But that was the first time I got into a creative world. And then I realized that after the show started airing, that my what I was trying to communicate was, because people started writing me to thank me and to tell me that I was inspiring them.
So you got feedback.
So I got this, positive feedback, and I'm like, wow, like, this is great. Like, I must be doing something right, because if you can impact people in a positive way, it means you're doing something right. So that was the first entrance. The second thing that happened was about 4 years after I started the TV show. One day I was doodling on a napkin.
Yeah.
But like I tell people, I wasn't, I didn't think like, oh, I'm gonna paint something today. No, I was just
You're doodling.
Doodling. And a lady was watching me, and she asked me if I was an artist. I said no, and she said, well, you need to paint.
Okay. Now, where were you when this happened?
I was in Nashville.
Were you in a coffee shop?
No, I was at a friend's house.
At a friend's house.
Yeah, he was a friend of my friend. She was an artist. And actually, a few days before, we had gone to her kind of like studio. And it was funny because when I saw her stuff, I thought to myself, like, I think I could do, not in a bad way, but I'm like, I think I could do this.
Yeah.
When I was looking at her work, you know. And so, a few days later, she came to visit my friend. And I was just, doodling, and she was like, hey, you need to paint. And so I was like, well, how do I paint, And she was like, well, just, if you can paint on a napkin, just make them bigger.
Okay. And so you said, what the heck?
Well, yeah, but I also thought like, okay, like, I don't know if I can do it, I mean, I was open to it, but...
But you had no background in visual arts.
No.
But you were open to it.
So I was open to it, so I went and I bought some material, but I mean, I went and bought a piece of wood at Home Depot, and then I bought cheap Walmart painting, it was just basic stuff. And every night I would sit at a table and just paint. And one thing that...
So every night you did that?
Mm-hmm, every night.
Sounds like the discipline that you developed as a child
in sports
manifested itself or was able to be put to good use here.
Mm-hmm. And then one thing that I do know that happened, it was when I started trying to combine colors.
Yeah.
It was as if someone was guiding me.
Okay.
To pick the right colors to paint.
Okay.
And I mean, I recognized because I didn't. It wasn't just me. It wasn't like me thinking, oh, what color should I put? For a painting to look nice, or if it's very colorful, it needs to have the right balance of colors, right?
Yeah.
And so when I started painting, it was like as if somebody drew my eyes to the next color.
It was something beyond your brain that you would normally use in everyday decision making. There was something else that was coming through you.
Yeah, and that to me was very unusual.
So you hadn't experienced that before in other areas of your life?
I mean, as a tennis player, but it's more skills.
Yeah.
I mean, painting is also skills, but I think painting is different than sports.
Of course.
It's totally different, No, I had never experienced, like having this kind of like inner guide, or somebody guide you to pick what was there, and then I would use that color, and then I was like, wow, like it looks good, and then I would go to bed, wake up in the morning, and the first thing I would do was like wake up to look at it, and I'm like, wow, like this is crazy that I'm doing this.
Yeah.
You know, because eventually I started showing them to people, and people were drawn to the paintings. You know, a lot of people started commenting how they like the paintings, how they make them feel certain positive feelings, and that was the second part of, you know, how I got involved in the more creative, you know, aspect of what I do now.
Yeah. So it sounds like those two examples were examples of you paying attention to what was going on around you and being open to connections with others. And obviously you're putting out an energy. So for instance, the person who you engaged with who suggested that you could do this television show, obviously you're putting out an energy of you want to make a connection with someone and people are feeling connected to you. But then again, and that was sort of the same thing with the doodling, where people are feeling like they can approach you and you're putting out this energy with your creativity. But that again was combined with taking those two opportunities and using your discipline and working really, really hard and to make them into what, you know, eventually where you are today.
Yes, and I think, you know, a lot of people I think we all humans get opportunities.
Yes.
I don't think just one person gets everything, you know. I mean, every day we're like flooded with opportunities.
Do you think that people just don't notice them?
I think people don't have their inner voice awakened, some of them, because you cannot live life just by thinking that 1 + 1 is 2. 1 + 1 it is 2, but if you live life just like that, you miss out on so many opportunities. If you just do everything by the book every single day, you always get the same results that you know of what you're doing. Sometimes you need to stop thinking with your head, and you need to let things, you know, be open to things. And I think I've always had a dream, always. First it was tennis, then triathlon, then, you know, I built the tennis business, then the TV, then the painting. So I've always had something bigger than myself, bigger than I could control.
Okay.
To be passionate about.
Yeah.
I've always done the same with every dream. You wake up the next morning and it's like, how am I going to do this dream? You know, discipline, working hard. I never take no for an answer. And I think a lot of people out there, you know, they're like, okay, yeah, well, I have this dream, but the next day, you know, they wake up at 12.
Yep.
And I mean, I
see that all the time.
You know, I put in 14 years with my brand Dream Big, which includes the TV part, the merchandising now, and my art. It's been 14 years of, you know, 12, 14 hours a day.
Yeah.
I would have not been able to do that if I didn't have the discipline that I had since I was young. I mean, you can become disciplined at any stage in your life, you know, just because you didn't play sports or you didn't have discipline when you were a kid doesn't mean that if you're 40 you cannot start to have some discipline, but it takes discipline to be disciplined.
No, that makes complete sense. That makes complete sense to me. So you are currently a designer, entrepreneur, and you travel around the world. When you were a kid growing up, did you ever envision that this is what your life would be?
No. Maybe traveling, yes, you know, because I always liked traveling. But as a designer, artist, entrepreneur, you know, that I would have in merchandising and stores, no, because I didn't even grow up around people like that. I grew up, you know, my dad was an engineer, but he was very athletic. My grandfather he had a successful business as an accountant, and I was surrounded more with business people, other than, you know, creative people. So I was never in front of, you know, painters or designers, or I mean, sometimes you hear the stories of famous designers, and they tell you like, hey, my grandmother had a sewing room.
Right. Yeah, you do hear that a lot.
And I was always in, with textiles, and that's where my love from.
That's not your story.
No, it was totally up. And then sports obviously had nothing to do with design and art. My first dream, yes, it was to be a professional tennis player. I got to play in college in the US. And then I realized that, okay, I was already 24, and, my talent gave me to accomplish to play in college, But that didn't, a lot of people, when they don't accomplish one dream, they get mad at life, or at, like, if I had this dream, how come it didn't happen? And for me,
and then it's over.
And then it's over. Like, they don't do anything else with their life.
Yeah.
For me, it wasn't like that. I took it as, okay, I accomplished this. I'm 24. I'm sure I'm going to do many other things. And that way of thinking was because of my mom as well.
Yeah.
My parents, how they raised me. You don't take one failure as the end of the world. And it doesn't matter what age you are.
Is that something that they told you, or is that something that they lived and you observed, or both?
They lived. For example, my parents were divorced when I was 15, and it was very hard for me. But I always saw my mom happy. Always. I never saw her and I never heard from both of them talking bad about each other. Each of them, lived their separate lives, and I saw that they were happy, and I'm like, okay, well, that was an obstacle in their lives that they overcame, but happy, and they both, grew in their lives.
Yeah.
I think people get to obstacles, and suddenly, if they cannot overcome that obstacle, it's like their life is over.
Or they blame it, on others.
Or they blame it on others, yes. And it's very easy to blame your failures on other people. Oh, he didn't do this, or,
Sure.
there's so many excuses you can make.
Which sometimes are valid, but you can't focus on them. You have to focus on what you can change and what you can do in your own behavior.
Yes, I could have blamed my parents. They were divorced, and now, what was going to happen with my life? And I know so many people that are so mad at their parents, when, I love both of my parents, and,
Yeah.
hey, great that, it's just, when you start seeing obstacles as adventures and ways to overcome them.
Obstacles as adventures. I've never heard of.
It's like if you're going to go climb Everest. It's a big obstacle to get. But if you're passionate about climbing, you're going to make sure you overcome every obstacle. And each step you take could be an adventure in a way,
Sure.
So for me, obstacles are... Every day is an adventure, today I don't even worry about obstacles.
So you have a level of confidence in yourself that regardless of what is thrown in front of you, you'll be able to get through it and potentially even embrace it as an adventure.
Yes, and confidence in myself, and also faith. Without faith, it's really hard to do anything.
So is this faith in like a God higher power, or like a type of thing, or is this faith? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
It's a combination. I have faith in God.
Okay.
I'm not religious. I grew up Catholic. Because in Mexico, everybody's Catholic, but just because you're born in a country, everybody tells you, oh, I'm Catholic, So I'm not so much religious, but my mom instilled, and my grandmother was Jewish, so my mom instilled in us, to believe that there's a God that's bigger than you, that has a purpose for your life, that can guide you. But then you also need to have confidence and faith in you.
Yes.
Because I also know a lot of people that pray to their God or God, and then they wake up and they don't believe in what they're doing.
Or they don't do anything.
Or they don't do anything.
Like they pray in the morning and then they're in bed till noon.
Yeah.
Not acting.
Yeah, and so I'm very fortunate that I have both.
It's a partnership.
Yeah, I have faith in God, and I have faith in myself. I'm confident in my talents. I'm confident in who I am. I don't brag about, myself, but you need to have a certain level of confidence in and believe in what you're doing, who you are.
Of course.
If not, people think like, okay, this guy doesn't even believe in what he's doing. So I think it's very important to I mean, for me, there's been so many obstacles, like so many, but I've also seen miracles.
Okay.
Through this adventure, I've seen so many miracles that there's no way I could have orchestrated all of that to happen.
Yeah.
Unless there was someone bigger watching over me.
Okay.
And I think people don't experience miracles a lot of times because they don't step out. If you control everything every day, how do you expect to let someone in? You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
It's really hard.
Regardless of whether it's a spiritual, well, I think it's probably always a spiritual thing, but whether it's a religious thing, there's an idea of sort of letting go the reins of things in your life from your own control, and it does open you up to things to who knows what's going to happen. For instance, I mean, even those examples that you gave where it was about the doodling and someone observing it, that's something you could not have controlled or planned. Or, you can't go and get a degree from a business school and plan an experience like that. That is simply being yourself and being open and letting things happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you just one example of a miracle. For me, a miracle,
Okay.
It's after a few years that I started painting. I was doing the TV show for free in LA. In 2008, there was like the crisis, housing crisis. So my tennis business was going down because people didn't want to play as much anymore. Anyway, so I ended up with I didn't have a place to live anymore. So I was investing all my money on the TV show and painting. So painting didn't give me any money at the beginning.
Yeah.
And so literally I had, from living in Santa Monica on the beach, I gave up that, having a fancy, expensive convertible, gave up that, ended up borrowing a car from my brother who has a car business, but he lent me the cheapest car he had, a $500 car with the windshield broken.
So you had all the stuff, and now you didn't have the stuff.
And then nothing, And literally that night I didn't have any gas. I had a cent in my pocket, literally, a few quarters. And I was parked in Beverly Hills in front of this coffee bean. I used to, like Starbucks, I used to go to this coffee bean and I would work there. And I was laughing because I'm okay, I do have this dream. I work really hard, but I have no gas, nothing to eat, and 75 cents in my pocket. And it was the little boys just told me hey, go every night you go to the coffee bean and just sit there and work. And I said, sure, I'm gonna do that again. So I got out of the car and went in the coffee bean and I sat in one of the tables. And at that time I had this hand-painted t-shirt that I was painting myself. And so I just got out my computer and about 20 minutes later there was a guy sitting close by and he's hey, I like the t-shirt you're wearing. I said, thank you. He said, where do you get it? I said, well, I paint them. I'm an artist. And he said, well, how much do you charge for, to paint one? I said, about $80. He said, okay, let's exchange information,
Okay.
before we go, blah. So a few minutes later, I kept working, and then he got up and he said, hey, nice to meet you. Give me your contact. And then he put his hand in his. I didn't tell him my story of that I had nothing and nothing. I mean, I just told him I was an artist and I was working there. And he put his hand in his pocket and he said, hey, do you mind if I give you $40 as an advance? I knew that was a miracle.
Yeah.
Because I had 75 cents. And I said, sure. I took the $40.
Okay.
Gave him my contact. He left and a week later he brought me a t-shirt, I painted it, and he paid me the other $40. I mean, that's one. I can tell you hundreds of
Sure.
miracles. But, a lot of people in that situation would be why me? Why do I have to go through this? That's what I mean, adventure. I mean, that to me is it's better than climbing Mount Everest,
Yeah. That makes sense. And let me just comment on that, because you're saying that some people, when they would be at a coffee shop with 75 cents, they would be, why me? And if you, and someone who is in a why me, it shows in your stance, and someone is not going to approach them to buy a t-shirt because they're going to be giving off that energy. And it sounds like you were obviously not giving off that energy. I don't know where your head was, but it obviously was not in a place of desperation. And people were detecting that.
And that's the confidence you have, and,
Yeah.
and that's how I explain faith. If you had met me back then, I was the same person. Maybe I had less gray hair, but you haven't even have thought that I only had 75 cents, because my personality doesn't change according to the weather or according to how much money I have in the bank.
According to the outside stuff.
According to the outside stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when you're grounded inside, and when you have this confidence and this faith.
So how do you think that people could find that inner confidence and that faith and that groundedness? People that are listening to this.
So I think faith comes by feeding your spirit.
Okay.
I think nowadays it's even tougher to feed your spirit because we're bombarded with so much trash. I mean, social media, internet, everything out is just not, few things feed your spirit. You turn the news on and it's like killings everywhere.
Yeah.
So one thing that I'm also very fortunate is, since I was a kid, my mom always sowed in us our spirit.
Okay.
Not all by the words she told us, but like I said, I'm not religious, but for me, like the Bible, I've read the Bible, the Old Testament, the New Testament. I've taken a lot of wisdom, from that book.
So you have read the Bible?
Yeah, since I was 13 years old.
So is that, I've never read, I grew up Catholic, but I've never read the Bible. And is that something that you would read like a book from beginning to end, or is that something that you, reference for inspiration?
When I was young, and I was like 14, most of my friends are 14, they didn't even care, about the Bible or anything, but my mom gave me a Bible when I was 14. It's when my parents were getting divorced.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, like, why is my mom giving me a Bible? Like, this is not like a fun gift.
Not for a 14-year-old.
No, but I always saw my mom, but we all have a spirit. And our spirit sometimes is drawn, to feed the spirit is drawn to things that will feed the spirit. Yep. It's like your body, you're hungry, you're drawn to things that would nourish your body.
Or what it needs, like salt or,
But sometimes we're like, okay, the spiritual part is like, oh, I don't want people to think I'm like religious or, But I used to see my mom or watch her read the Bible all the time.
Okay.
And she was always happy. Like, she was not religious at all. So one day I really took the Bible and I just opened it, and it was like in Proverbs. And I just started reading, and I realized like there was so much wisdom, and so many positive, words in for example, just Proverbs, that I kept reading it.
Okay.
Since I was like 14, 15, and I read it every day. And I took, like, for example, there's like a verse that I love, it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not into your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. Even if you take, trust in the Lord out, and you take the rest.
Those are very specific, powerful words.
Powerful words, and if you're in a situation where, like, you don't know what to do, instead of saying like, oh crap, nothing works, my life sucks, which a lot of people do all the time, you trust. And like, okay, who do you trust in? Well, I decide to trust in God, even though I can see him.
Yeah.
Or in a higher power that's higher than me, and you trust that he will guide your path. And as an entrepreneur, as a business person, you also start encountering a lot of people who are not, they don't have the best intentions.
Yep.
So how do you know who to work with? How do you know if that person is gonna cheat you? So you follow that same trust, or that voice starts telling you, like those people are not, don't have the same intentions that you do.
Yeah.
So for me, that's how I fed my spirit for many, many, many years. And then my grandmother was Jewish, and my mom, she started going to a synagogue more to study.
Okay.
Not like, Orthodox and all these rules. But there's so much that she started learning of truth of how to live a successful life, So she's passed a lot of that. It's wisdom in the end,
Yeah.
If you are in tough situation, it's like, well, you need wisdom to figure out how to overcome an obstacle,
Yep.
how to be successful in business. So, I tell people like, just find what fits your spirit.
Yeah. So I can tell you, I'm definitely not a religious person, and I've never read the Bible, even though I grew up Catholic. Although I am kind of curious about potentially reading it as more of a book as opposed to a spiritual document. But that's another whole story. But I will tell you, the way that I get connected to my spirit or what have you is through exercise and running. Like, I will tell you, if I am feeling disconnected or I need guidance, I will go for a 6-mile run. And it's a little bit of a meditative prayer situation when I'm running, and it's very, very helpful.
Yeah, for me, sports and running and like you said, like running is always, it clears your mind, but then that voice talks to you.
Yes.
Ideas. I get
so many ideas
Yeah.
running. It's unbelievable. It changes my brain. Like something happens. It's like taking a drug, really. Like I hear people take like psychedelic drugs like mushrooms, which I've never done, but it can be a little bit like that. Like I will have a challenge, and if I go for a run and I'm really focusing on my breathing, I will come up with all of these ideas that I just simply would never come up with if I wasn't in that heightened brain state that running does to me.
Yeah, it's the same for me. That's why I still keep running. I think more people also need to take exercise as a form of, because running or biking or it takes your mind out of the place you're how do I say it? It takes you out of the environment that you're always in.
Yeah.
Like every day you're in this environment, whether it's like homework, work, home. If you have kids, it's like, oh, you take your kids. It's like people getting this monotonous life, like with nothing new. So I always tell people, like, do something. If you always drive the same road to work, like
Mix it up.
Or if you always go to the same place to get your coffee, go to another one. It's like
Completely.
And travel.
Or try something. Just be open to trying a new experience, because I completely agree with you that people do the same cycle. It's like home, work, Netflix, whatever, and then on the weekends, whatever people are doing, it's probably the same thing, whether it's like going out to a bar drinking or whether it's staying home and catching Netflix binging or what have you. But I think being open to new adventures, it kind of inspires you, and you never know how it's going to inspire you to see things in a different way.
Yeah, and then when you go different places, you meet different people too.
Yes.
It's like if you go to, most people are, humans are, we tend to do the same thing every day because we're comfortable.
Yeah.
It's hard to get out of that comfort zone, but when you get out of it, then you realize like, wow, and that's what I talk about, like for me, life is an adventure. I don't take it as, oh, I have to wake up and do this, and which.
Yeah.
I love what I do.
Yeah.
Thank God that I'm fortunate to live of my passion. But if I kept doing it over and over the same way every day, I would get the same results every day,
Yeah, and I think looking at your life and looking at what you do in a fresh way can make it more exciting. So one of the people that I interviewed for my podcast is a realtor. And the idea of being a realtor isn't particularly thrilling to me because I think about it as selling homes. and you can listen to the interview, but he thinks about his job as creating communities. So he's basically like selling homes in communities and pulling different people together to create a community. Mm-hmm. And we talked about this. I'm like, if I got out of bed every day thinking that's what I'm doing, that sounds incredible. That sounds amazing. That's much more interesting than selling a house.
Sure.
So it's kind of like the similar idea of what you're saying. Think about what you're doing in a new, fresh way. Makes it much more inspiring to get out of bed every morning.
Yeah, and you can be creative in any profession. I mean, you don't have to be an artist or a painter or an actor. You can be creative as a mechanic, or you can be creative as a housewife, or as an engineer or a business person. I think creativity gives you the opportunity to discover what you do, but in a different way.
Yeah. I agree with you. And I keep hearing that. Well, that's kind of one of the points of the podcast, and it keeps coming up. Can you talk a little bit more about that, about how someone who is in a role that isn't traditionally considered creative, how they could approach it in a creative way or be more creative?
There's a lot of professions that, if you're a doctor, it's hard to say like, okay, today instead of operating the same, the way you have to operate. There's professions that are very specific.
Absolutely.
To get a result. You can't play with your patients. You kill them.
Absolutely. That's what being a doctor is all about, is protocol.
You still have to be specific in how you do your job.
Sure.
And how you do it, but it's the outside of that protocol.
Yeah.
Is how do you do your life so it's not monotonous.
Okay.
So it's like the doctor getting from home, hospital, same way so it's like you become, you try to change things in your life, and like we said, if you go to the same place every weekend, go somewhere else. If you go to the same bar or the same gym, or if you run 6 miles every day, the same loop, well, do it in a different way another day.
Yeah.
Other professions are easier to entrepreneurship, business people, you can be more creative. I have the opportunity to literally do whatever I want. I'm selling my merchandising, and I don't just go by the book. If I go to like a big retailer and they tell me like, okay, well, we'll take it on consignment, I'll figure out a way that,
Well, that's the whole idea of being creative is such a big component of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Is being able to not go by
the book,
the established rules, and to be able to think on the fly and come up with new ideas. Mm-hmm. I remember years ago, I started a small web development business, and I was friends with someone who was going to medical school to become an anesthesiologist. And I remember I was envious because I knew that I'm sure he's a very wealthy anesthesiologist right now. But I remember him being very curious about what I was doing. And I told him I was creating websites for small businesses, and I was doing graphic design. And he's like, so where do you get your clients? And I was describing that. And I'll never forget him telling me that he was, I don't know the words he used, but he sort of admired it because he said, I'm never going to be able to do anything creative in my entire career as an anesthesiologist. Like I am learning the protocol and the steps and the rules. I will not have that opportunity. And I had never thought of that at all. I always just thought about being an anesthesiologist, you're going to be very wealthy. I never thought that there would be really any negative implications. Not that that's necessarily negative, but I just never thought of it in that way. Yeah. That it's all about adhering. And I think a lot of roles that people are in, I think a lot of the rules and the ways to be successful, someone has kind of already figured it out. And you just need to do what tasks are laid out for you, and you either try to do them more of them than the person sitting next to you, or you try to do them with better quality. And neither one of those is very creative. So I think that it's a challenge for people to come up with ways to approach things in a new way.
Yeah, in those cases, that's why you need to be more creative in Europe, because building homes too. There's a way. Unless you discover new ways to build homes, new materials and things like that. But there's things like are laid out already that it's hard to get out of that. If not, you kill a person.
Yeah, if you're thinking about new ways, new materials, inventing a new material to build a home, there's some risk associated with that. Okay.
Yeah.
So can you provide listeners 2 pieces of advice that they can use to use the creative parts of their mind to move things forward in their life?
Always know where you're going and know what you want. Because if you don't know what you want, that's like, for me, the first step. What do you want?
Okay.
And in order to get where you want, then you figure out different ways to go get it, And the second one is never give up, because, it's not easy, but it's possible.
Yep. So
you really need to make a decision, like, not to give up if it's something that you really, really want and that you're passionate about. And I always finish, like, when I do like conference or an interview, and there's a phrase that I wrote that I think summarizes pretty much everything I do, that says, it doesn't matter where you come from or how much money you have. If you have faith, a dream, and you work hard, you can accomplish anything.
Well, all right. That's great. Where can people learn about you and learn about your products?
Social media, I'm Juan de Lascurain.
Can you spell that?
Yes, Juan, and then DE space LASCURAIN. All Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and then dreambigworld.com as well.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
I really enjoyed this. I'm so glad that I got to see your the talk that you gave yesterday, and I listened to it, and I'm thinking, I need to get this guy on my podcast, and I'm so glad that this worked out.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for reaching out. Nice to meet you.
My name is Ricky McGuckrin, and you have been listening to Eager to Know, the podcast. If you haven't already, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join me next week for another Eager to Know podcast.